You say, who am I to reach for the sky? But babe, who are you not to? I think you've got to, and don't worry, we've got you. We're gonna spot you when the weight gets too heavy. We'll hold your hand steady, and we'll be the first to throw the confetti at your party when you make it. You say you can't take it, but that doubt, you better shake it. That is the beginning of a new poem that I actually haven't released yet, so coming soon. And it is the theme of today's video. So if you enjoyed that and you like poetry in general, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And I recently published my first poetry book called Create and Receive, Make and Believe, Finding Peace Through Primarily Positive Poetry, available on Amazon. You can, of course, also check out my website, powerfulandpoised.com, for additional courses, resources, coaching, and all of that. But for today, we are going to talk about this limit that I see people put on themselves all the time, and I do it too. And it's this feeling that we can't fully express our deepest dreams, our deepest desires. So we say, who am I to dream big? Who am I to have a wish that audacious, that bold? And maybe secretly we have it, but then we stop ourselves from voicing it. And I've noticed this when I talk to people about my dreams, and I kind of limit myself. I don't go all in and say exactly what I want. I'm like, oh, it'd be nice to sell some books. But I never say, like, I want to be a New York Times bestselling author. And of course, there are people that have no shame doing that, and they go for it. But I've noticed in a lot of my clients and even my friends, they do the same thing. And I know that they want more, and they'll say it sometimes, but then we do this exercise of like, okay, now say it as if you have it. And they'll say, I'm a millionaire. And I do the same thing. And so it's like we limit ourselves. We feel afraid to admit the thing that we actually want. So for example, one time my boss asked me, he said, what would you do if you earned $1 million this year? And I literally was like, I don't know. Like, I guess I'd pay off my student loans, and I would probably, like, I don't know, go out to eat more. Like, I don't really spend a lot of money. And he was like, no. Like, dream big. What would you really do? I'm like, I would go to India and I would plan this quest. And then I got more in depth with it. And I did an exercise personally last night, even though he and I had that conversation over a year ago. Last night I was thinking about this, and I wrote out what I would actually do with that money. And I think that was the first time I really put it in words. And so I just wanted to make a little video about how we are limiting ourselves and how we can start to notice ways that we're limiting ourselves, and hopefully encourage anyone listening to feel more comfortable expressing your actual desires and not putting a limit on it, thinking that we want to be humble, for example. Like, I don't want to say I want $1 million because money is bad or whatever. And we can talk about that in a minute, but just being audacious and bold, setting your goals. And of course, there's an argument to be made to say set realistic goals. So I may not say, like, I'm gonna make $1 million this year if I'm on track to do that and I have no strategies in place. But to have the dream and to articulate what it would mean if that happened in realistic terms, I think is a really powerful reframe. So I'm not saying my goal is to make $1 million this year necessarily, but we can do the practice of saying, if I had $1 million, here's what I would do with it, in a way that feels realistic, so that we can take these big, bold goals and make them actually seem practical. So I'm going to start there and go a little deeper with the money goal, because I realized a belief I was imposing on myself, a limitation I was imposing on myself, was that subconsciously I had the belief that if I make $1 million this year, then I will very wisely invest everything and probably not have to work so much. And that is a subconscious belief that money would make me lazy. and then I wouldn't live my purpose. I wouldn't continue to do these videos, for example. But then I sat down and I really thought about it, and I'm like, I don't think that's true. Like, I'm not making money from these videos as of yet, and I do it anyway because I like it. If I were in it for the profit, I should look elsewhere. And so I do it because I want to share these messages, and I like sharing my poetry, and I like building the community. And so what I would do if I had that money would be things like invest in courses so that I could improve this channel, invest in better equipment so that I could improve this channel. I would hire people to help me market my book and help me market my courses, and I would build more courses because I'd have all the time in the world to focus on my craft and my writing and my poetry. And once I reframed it to say, oh, money wouldn't make me lazy, money would make me more aligned with my vision and my goals. And so I encourage you to think of a big goal you have that is maybe not a realistic goal, but just an idea you have that feels way too far-fetched. It will stay far-fetched and unattainable as long as you have those subconscious limiting beliefs that say, oh, that's too big of a dream. But if you actually take the dream and write out what it would realistically look like in your life, then I think that's a really powerful way to identify your subconscious blocks and start to, again, gradually reframe them so that it's not this big pie in the sky dream. It's, oh, okay, this is actually practical. And then, of course, you do need the strategies and all that stuff in place to get there. But I'm a big believer in having faith in things. And I think the first step is setting the intention without a big block in the way that, for example, says that money would make me lazy. And therefore, part of me doesn't want to earn all that money because I'm like, then I wouldn't be a contributing member of society. When now I can train my subconscious mind to recognize that's not true at all, I would actually be able to step more into my purpose, more into my power if I had those financial resources more readily abundant. So the other big thing I wanted to touch on is this quote that my brother shared with me by I believe, UFC fighter, and his name is George St. Pierre. And he said, a fear and a dream are both untrue. Right? So your fear, our worries, and our dreams are both stories. They're stories we tell ourselves. So I can tell myself that that's too big of a financial goal and that if I try to do that, I'll fail. Or I can tell myself that no one's going to watch this YouTube video and it's going to be a big waste of my time. Or I can have these fears, as you can, about things that you're not looking forward to in your own life. I talk a lot about social anxiety on this channel and getting comfortable with social skills. So that's a fear we might have, is I'm afraid they're going to judge me. These people won't like me. I'm afraid I'll be awkward. I'm afraid this party won't be fun. XYZ. Those are all stories. And the dream, the goal, is also a story. Unless you know for a fact, like for example, if you have a goal of saving $100 and you know you're going to be paid $200 for 5 weeks and you set aside a certain amount of money, that's like a very tangible goal that, okay, that's pretty much guaranteed unless something happens. But when it comes to dreams or more lofty goals that you don't know exactly how you're going to get there, that's also a story, essentially, that we're telling ourselves that I'm going to make $1 million this year. But that story feels a lot better in my body than saying, like, having the fear that, oh my gosh, what if I go into debt this year? Which doesn't even feel good to express or to indulge in. And so same thing with the other examples. If you're thinking about the party, you can have the fear of, oh my gosh, it's going to be so awkward. Or you can have the desire, the dream that it's going to go so smoothly and I'm going to have so much fun. And sometimes it's hard to indulge in that and to say that out loud or even say it to ourselves because we feel like we don't have the evidence to prove that to be true. If we were awkward at the last party, we're probably going to be awkward at this one, is how we feel. but the actual scenario has not happened yet. So regardless of whether or not you have evidence in the past, doesn't mean that for a fact this next party is going to go that way. Now, of course, we're balancing this with other exercises we can do that I've talked about before, about finding evidence to prove your subconscious wrong with those limiting beliefs and finding evidence to prove your new beliefs right. So, for example, if you feel like you're always awkward at parties, then I encourage you to write a list of all the times that you've had positive social experiences. Keep a running list so that the next time you're about to go to a party, you can reference that list and boost your confidence. But I digress. That's a little tangential, but just acknowledging things that may be coming to mind as I'm talking through this. But really, in either case, the fear or the worry and the dream, ideal scenario, those are both stories that we're telling ourselves. Why not write a story that feels good? The biggest piece of resistance to doing this, to writing a story that feels good, usually is because we're afraid of disappointment. What if I tell myself it's going to go really well and then it doesn't, then I'm going to feel really bad? That's fair. And the temporary pain of disappointment is so much less than the pain of regret from not trying. And in my experience, what I've noticed is that if we don't dream, if we stay in the fear place and we don't have hope that something positive could come of it, we'll never even try. If you expect the party to be super awkward, you may not even go. Versus if you have an expectation that it might be a little fun or there might be one or two fun things that happen, at least you'll get out there and try. And then you have a chance to make it happen. One of the number one regrets people have at their end of their lives is not trying. People say all the time from their deathbeds, from what I've heard, and something, my mom has a terminal illness, so she thought she was going to die a few years ago, and so she's always thinking about her life and reflecting on it, and the biggest regret people have is not trying things when they have the time and the energy and the motivation and the dream, and being afraid to even give it a go. So if you rewrite the story of the fear into a story of potential, a story of excitement, a story of what if I make $1 million this year, here's what I would do with it. And that's where I think we can make this very practical, is you take the big dream and you write out how that would actually look in your real life. And that's when you can start to identify blind spots or pieces of resistance. So if I write out what I would do with the money and then I realize like, oh, I actually don't really know what I would do with all that money, then you're not gonna, at a subconscious level, you're not gonna be motivated to actually earn it, probably. And I know I've talked a lot before on this channel about how worries are stories, and I haven't thought so much about the fact that our future dreams are stories too, but they are, and we can make them reality. We have a chance to make them reality, but if there's a fear that you don't want to become reality, don't write the story. We are inherently creative beings, and we are constantly co-creating with the universe, and so if we're writing the story of the fear, that's more likely to come true than the story of the dream. And if you're afraid of dreaming too big, do it anyway. Make it practical for yourself. And so all of this is to say, my point I want to make here, because I'm just kind of throwing in a hodgepodge of things that I've heard from different manifesting channels and examples from my own life and conversations I've had with my brother and other friends and things I've noticed in my clients, is here's what I encourage you to practice. Write out a big, bodacious goal that feels impractical, or a dream that you're like, I don't know if that would ever happen. Write it out anyway. And then write it in detail how it would really look in your real life. Because so much power comes with clarity. And this is something I've struggled with for so long. I'll have this idea of like, yeah, I want to be a successful whatever. I want to be a writer. But then it's like, well, what does that mean? Do I want to be a New York Times bestselling author? Why do I want that? Do I want to make a certain amount of money? Why do I want that certain amount of money? Do I want to have a certain number of followers? Why do I want a certain number of followers? And I've never really been super clear on all of that. I'm just like, it'll all work out. And that does serve me to some degree. But I think it's also really helpful to sit down and reflect on what do we want without being so attached to the specifics. So I, for example, I don't say like I want to be a New York Times bestselling author because that's less important to me than affecting the lives of the people who read my book. I would rather have fewer people that read my book and really feel their lives transformed than have a billion people buy my book and think it's like, okay. And it's actually the first time I realized that, that I made that realization. So, because I mean, yeah, it'd be cool to be a best-selling author, but the reason I want to be a best-selling author is to help people's lives. And sometimes labels and awards and numbers don't always mean we're doing the thing that we feel like we want. So sometimes, for example, earning all the money, people say a lot of times people earn a lot of money and they still feel empty because it's not actually the money they were after. It's the impact they could have or whatever, however they want to reinvest that money in themselves. And if they have the money but they don't have a clear idea of what they want to do with it, then maybe that's why they end up feeling empty. Anyway, just a hodgepodge of thoughts. I hope that was helpful. I encourage you to write out a big goal and then write out the specifics of how that would realistically look in your life and how you'd want it to look. And don't be afraid to dream really, really, really big and say it out loud. And if you feel yourself hesitating of like, that sounds so like awkward, which happens. I was doing this exercise with someone and we were both saying our biggest dreams out loud and we both were like, oh, this feels weird. So I forced myself to keep saying it until it started feeling natural. So I encourage you to practice that too. And if you want more tips on confidence and showing up sure and feeling good talking to people or just poetic inspiration and motivation, please sign up for my email newsletter. I do have a free downloadable poetic pep talk in the description as well. And that is just a little 10 minutes to start your day. People who have listened to it said it brings tears to their eyes and leaves them feeling really good for the rest of the day. So I hope you check that out as well. Thank you so much for listening and helping me slowly but surely chip away at my big dreams.